Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today our special guest is Richard Sims from Tyrannosaurus Tech. It is a software company development firm located in Atlanta, Georgia. They specialize in mobile and web development, partnering with entrepreneurs and enterprise-level clients to bring their ideas to life on the web. Each day, they're building beautiful websites and apps for their clients with a proven, iterative, and consultative process. Welcome to the show, Richard.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Well, let's get right into it. I want to find out from you who exactly it is that you help. Who is your perfect prospect?
Sure. Great question. And since we are, kind of an agency, and since there is that consultative side to what we do, one thing that's very fun for us is we have a pretty diverse group of clients, which makes it, again, really engaging for us. We get visibility to a lot of different types of businesses and problems that are, attempting to be solved. But, our perfect prospect, to put it simply, is typically either an entrepreneur. So we do a lot of work with early stage companies and startups that, are building a website or a mobile or web-based application that they're kind of building up a business around that. So oftentimes it's, a small team of founders or even an individual entrepreneur. In some instances, they're self-funded. In many instances, they've raised capital from, investors in their area. So oftentimes entrepreneurs, and then kind of the flip side of that is we do a good bit of work with bigger, more established companies. And typically we're working with either an individual or a small team of what I like to call intrapreneurs. And so that really is someone that is, innovating within an existing company. They may have an idea for a problem that they can solve internally, or kind of a new product line or some new side of the business that is functioning like a startup within this bigger entity. So generally we're working with, again, people that are, pursuing a new idea, trying to solve a problem, bringing an idea to life. And again, sometimes that's within a big company that already exists. Sometimes it's, a couple folks that, have the guts to kind of step out on their own and do their own thing.
So you work with both startups and established companies of all sizes, from a one person to a Fortune 500, probably. Now, I'm sure they all have different problems that they have, but what are two or three of the problems that you really see that they need sorted out, and how do you solve them?
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a lot of variety, which is part of what's exciting for us. So, for bigger companies, typically the types of problems they're trying to solve, or I guess just a good example, is really just creating tech tools to kind of automate processes internally that historically have been done, more manually, right? So there are many companies that manage fairly complex processes or, incoming orders or whatever that might be, just in an Excel spreadsheet, right? Mm-hmm. And oftentimes there's someone internally that, rightly identifies that, hey, there's a lot of inefficiencies here. We could save a tremendous amount of time, or potentially, better service the client, or give them more of a, easy to use web-based ordering platform, or whatever that might be, that will kind of, again, solve some of their internal frustrations and some of the things they're doing more manually. And again, in some instances, create a better experience for their client, which is great. More on the true startup side, you can imagine there's a tremendous amount of variety in terms of what type of problem is being solved. I mean, we're doing projects that, as an example, are trying to solve, a problem or kind of capitalize on an opportunity in the real estate market. And then another client we're working with more is geared towards kind of a social networking platform with a new angle and a new demographic that it's trying to better serve than what is out there. So again, a lot of variety there. So we get to explore different industries, do a lot of research, understand our client's business, kind of come in with an outside perspective and more of a startup mentality. which is really fun and very challenging and engaging for us day to day.
So one of the main problems, I guess, with any company that you go into is the changing face of technology. Obviously technology is moving really fast, and I can imagine that many companies, especially the established ones, are going to be outdated. Is that something that you see a lot?
Yeah, absolutely, Neil. I think you're totally right. And I think for better or worse, that does just come with the territory of larger companies. Once you reach a certain level of success and scale, it does just naturally become harder to change and to be more nimble and to adopt newer technologies. So you're right. A lot of the larger organizations are, engaging with a company like us because if they need to quickly build some type of software solution or application, for example, they don't have the staff internally to do that necessarily. And frankly, in some instances, they don't have the mentality to bring something to life quickly. So we, myself and my partner, Carlos, our backgrounds are very much in the startup world. So we're used to moving very quickly. We do a lot of practicing kind of what are called lean startup methodologies. We run our shop on kind of agile development, which is a kind of a methodology behind software development that is very different from historically how it's been handled. So the way we work in some ways can be shocking, I think, to a bigger client that really isn't used to moving quickly. Again, obviously in a lot of bigger organizations, like even building a site for some type of app could take months and months and months and months because there's all these different folks that need to approve it and weigh in and, mapping out all of the features before any code is written. And that's very different than how we work. And naturally, the way that we work, frankly, is more in line with, what is kind of newer technologies, newer processes that have been proven to be more efficient, quicker, scale better. But again, we're kind of, for lack of a better word, oftentimes in the bigger organizations fighting some of that established mentality. But that's part of the fun, and that's part of why they bring us in, is they're aware that there are those trade-offs of getting bigger, unfortunately, and that sometimes they need to kind of inject some new blood into the equation, folks like us that kind of know how to do it with more of a startup mindset and get something going quickly.
It is amazing that some of these smaller companies, like you said, that are able to move nimbly and create something without, all those people having to approve it, just how fast they can grow into a great business with the right setup. Now, what are the benefits to either a startup or a big company coming in and getting your tech help? Are there financial benefits, time benefits? How do they save? Why do they need this problem solved?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think you hit the nail on the head in saying there are benefits both as far as saved time and saved money. And I think that's often the case for any service provider that companies are, contracting with. I mean, this is what we do day in, day out, right? And we are very well versed in getting apps built very quickly and working with, the newest technology that is the fastest, is, the best user experience and design, and kind of in line with, modern, web applications and mobile apps that you see out there. So, yeah, absolutely. Companies that are contracting with us, I mean, they're saving tremendous time because we're able to do it quickly ourselves. I think, frankly, in many cases, it doesn't make sense for those companies to hire developers, for this one-off project with this particular skill set, because it often is a one-time thing. They need a particular app built for some particular problem they're trying to address. So going out and hiring 3 Ruby on Rails developers, for example, really doesn't make sense for them financially. It takes a tremendous amount of time for them to try to go out and recruit those folks and onboard them. So yeah, contracting now to us, I mean, they're absolutely saving money, largely because we can do it more efficiently, more quickly, and cheaper than them hiring on folks internally. And similarly, we're saving them time by just getting started immediately and them not having to staff up for something that, really long term, they don't need those folks, salaried with them for.
Mm-hmm. So give me an example, Richard, of maybe somebody that you worked with recently, what kind of problem that they were having and how you were able to go in there, help and solve that problem.
Yeah, sure. And I'll speak, the one that comes to mind, I will speak somewhat vaguely since this is an ongoing client and it's a startup, and there's some, sensitivity around speaking too in depth to the product. But a good example that I referred to earlier is a relatively early stage startup we're working with that is addressing really an opportunity in the real estate space. And again, without getting too into detail, surrounds funding for purchasing of properties and kind of connecting, lenders and agents and prospective investors or buyers of different various types of properties. Again, I know that's very vague, but what we're helping to do is build the full-fledged, web application that facilitates all the communication between these different parties, visibility to different deals and properties that are out there. And so the process for us, in this case, this startup came to us with a very fleshed out business plan, capital that they had raised, pretty sophisticated wireframes that they had developed and mock-ups of what the application would actually look like. So what's interesting for us is in some instances, we're working with startups that they're really just at that idea phase, which is fun for us. We get to, again, be a little bit more consultative, help them kind of vet the idea, help them, do customer discovery, help them really narrow down the scope of what their, initial minimal viable product is going to be. And then in some instances, they're a little bit further along, like this one that I'm referring to, where, they're providing really high fidelity mock-ups of screens for this application. They have a pretty good sense of, specific features that they want. And so in that case, we're able to really hit the ground running because, we know what they're looking for. Just someone needs to actually code the guts and the functionality of this application. But we're not doing as much design or as much iteration. We're kind of getting right into the meat of building the functionality. So kind of varies depending on the client and where they are in that life cycle of, starting a new business or, prototyping a solution within an existing company. So it's kind of all over the map. And again, that variety is what I think, gets us out of bed each morning. It's never boring, to say the least.
Changing things every day. Now, as far as your services, you mentioned before that it doesn't make sense to hire somebody full-time, and sometimes it's just a one-time job that you go in and do. Is there an ongoing management of the service that you offer, or do you have any contracts or subscriptions to where you will go in and monitor things for these companies?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I probably, to a fault earlier, made it sound like it's always a one-time thing. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, Tyrannosaurus Tech, we're often kept on retainer with companies. So, there are a number of reasons a company might want to do that. Let's say they contract us to build their initial minimum viable product, right? Like the first iteration of the application that really is the driver behind their business. In some instances, they will keep us on retainer because they know, and hopefully they have some traction and they have good reason to believe they're going to continue growing in terms of their revenue and what their product is going to look like. So in some instances, they're paying us a monthly fee to kind of have a number of hours booked with us where we can be adding additional features to their application or, tweaking things to improve performance or whatever that might be. In some instances, like, there are smaller businesses like an association, for example, that has us on a conservative retainer where we're really just doing minor tweaks to their website each month. They need to add new copy or, pictures and bios for new team members that have joined their staff. So oftentimes it is more of a retainer model. And even in some instances with startups, they will kind of have us as what we call like acting CTO. So in some instances, there's a, non-technical founder that, is building out an idea and a business and has contracted us to, again, build that initial iteration of the product. And it's an ongoing relationship where we kind of act as their CTO, their chief technology officer, until they truly, are ready and can justify bringing on another full-time partner. So it's interesting. It very often is an ongoing relationship, and we like that a lot. I think there are plenty of situations where it makes sense just to kind of do a project and then, kind of go our separate ways. But probably, if anything, we prefer that ongoing relationship and can kind of build up a good rapport with a client and a better understanding of their business and where they're trying to go.
Mm-hmm. So what would you say is your magic ability when it comes to solving problems for these different companies that you work with? What does Tyrannosaurus Tech do different than other tech companies out there, and why do people choose to work with you?
Yeah, great question. And I think there's a couple main ways in which we kind of differentiate and kind of have our, secret sauce, if you will. So one, we are very much a boutique. And so in that sense, I think what we like is we're very, very hands-on with our clients. We don't really have folks that just come to us and, we just build what they ask for without a lot of analysis and conversation in a very constructive way. I mean, we're helping them vet, the idea, their customer discovery process, the scope of their initial, application that's being built. So we're very hands-on, very personal with our clients. That's one thing that we really enjoy, and again, I think is a differentiator. And then second, I would say, there's a lot of companies like ours, and this is not to knock them, but where it really is just a couple, very technical founders. They really have been developers their entire career, so they're very heads down kind of in the code. I think one thing that's nice about us is myself and my partner, Carlos, we have a really extensive background, not just in development and really living in the code, but really in entrepreneurship. I've started a few different companies. My partner, Carlos, has been involved in a number of startups, specifically here in the Atlanta tech community, as well as some larger, enterprise level companies. So I think we kind of bring that startup perspective, having been in the trenches ourselves. And that, of course, is what makes us well equipped to kind of have those conversations where it's not just about, the product itself. It's about the bigger picture and the problem that folks are trying to solve and where they really should focus and how to do so on a budget and build something that can scale when they're ready. So that's what's fun for us, is kind of tapping into our background and all the things that we've learned the hard way, doing a number of startups ourselves, and kind of bringing that to the table in those conversations.
Very good. Now, as far as some of the misconceptions about your service or the technical service as a whole, what are one or two of the misconceptions that people have when it comes to hiring a tech company?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, a lot of kind of the anxiety or misconceptions out there just have to do with kind of a natural intimidation with tech, which I totally understand. I think a lot of folks that have no familiarity with computer programming or, really just what's going on behind the scenes on the web and kind of how, different applications and websites are built, that can just naturally be very intimidating. So I think like a lot of people just have this misconception that, building out their idea has to be insanely complex and expensive. And that's not necessarily true. I mean, that's one thing we pride ourselves on is, making this stuff understandable for our clients, speaking through, their idea with them, or how we're going to build that tech-wise in language that is, non-intimidating and relatively easy to digest when you're not super tech savvy. And again, I think folks naturally think it's going to be a super complex, expensive process, and that doesn't have to be the case. I mean, again, I keep referencing kind of lean startup methodologies, agile development. Really what that means is like a big part of our process is we start small. We don't try to build this huge, complex product, particularly for startups. We start very simple, again, with kind of a minimum viable product where the scope is limited. We're trying to drill down to just a few key features that truly deliver value to the users. And then we iterate, right? We see how people use that. We see what features are most valued. We do a lot of customer discovery, again, analyzing how folks are using the tools. And then we iterate. We continue to build on that and kind of adapt. So it can be a lot more, again, starting small and building from there and being budget conscious rather than just stepping up to the plate and taking a huge swing for a home run. It's smart to kind of start small, spend less money, iterate, and go from there. So again, I think that's one thing. A lot of folks just don't quite understand that, and therefore trying to build something or contract a company to build out their ideas just that much more intimidating, because it seems like it has to be this huge mammoth of a project, and it really doesn't have to be that way, especially at the outset.
Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, tech can be a huge stumbling block for people like myself. It can really hold you back in moving forward and getting things done with your company. Well, what would you say is a reason that somebody might not decide to hire a tech company right away? What holds them back from taking that step?
Yeah, I think biggest thing, and I kind of referred to this a little bit in my previous answer, is just kind of very understandable anxiety that comes with trying to launch, a new product or business. It's, everyone's got great ideas. It's a whole other thing to, really pull the trigger and decide to move forward and kind of take that risk. So it really is scary, and that's understandable. That's mostly what holds folks up, I think. Like, we talk to a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs that have great ideas, and they've begun to think through them, but naturally they can get a little bit skittish about moving forward. And we try to be sensitive to that. And even in larger organizations, it's risky to try to do something new or to propose a solution to a problem you see, or to try to develop, a new arm of a business that could be a new revenue stream. So I think the biggest deterrent for people is just keeping the status quo. It feels a lot safer. But of course, in a healthy way, we encourage people to, take those risks, to try to run with their startup. And the main thing, again, is to start small. So especially for true entrepreneurs, we don't encourage them to spend a crazy amount of money and build this huge, insane product that they're really dumping their life savings into. There's a lot of ways to start small. That might be a very simple, stripped down app. It might be as simple as a prototype or mock-ups of your idea that you can then get feedback on and decide if you're ready to truly build the full product. There's a lot of ways to kind of start, in a conservative way that mitigates your risk and helps kind of prove your idea, before you really jump in with both feet, I guess.
Now, Richard, take me back a little while and tell me how you actually got started. Obviously, you've done a few startups yourself and now help people with that whole process. But how did you get started in this whole technology business?
Yeah, I'll try to give you kind of the short rundown. So I grew up here in Atlanta. So I've been back here for, I think, 4 or 5 years now, which has been super fun. But I worked in tech in DC for quite a while, and then I was doing a startup in Chicago before I moved back here. But immediately before starting Tyrannosaurus Tech, I co-founded a company here in Atlanta called Tech Talent South. And basically what Tech Talent South does is we run intensive programs teaching computer programming. So we actually teach folks, typically beginners, how to build websites, mobile apps, web applications. Typically these are, real classes taking place in a classroom. We do some corporate in-house training as well with different companies around the country. But at this point we have, a bunch of different campuses, primarily throughout the Southeast. But again, what we're doing is teaching people how to code. So one thing that's nice as far as this, relatively new venture with Tyrannosaurus Tech is a big part of what I've been doing for the last several years is kind of helping non-technical folks wade into these waters, helping them learn computer programming and how to build out an idea they have. So it's a relatively natural transition for me, and I'm still a part owner of that business. I basically sold my partner some of my stake, wanting to start a company like Tyrannosaurus Tech. But again, what's nice is like I've been working in that world for quite a while, where we're working with folks that have ideas that want to break into the tech world. We're trying to make it non-intimidating and kind of help them get up and running. So it's been a relatively natural transition for me, getting more hands-on with actual products again. And instead of working with students, working with clients that have an idea they're looking to develop. So I've kind of been in, all different sides of the tech and startup world. I mean, my background is more really on the business side, and I kind of got deeper and deeper into learning development, partially because I was excited about it, of course, but somewhat out of necessity, especially when I was doing the startup in Chicago. It was very early stage. It was really just me, one other more business-minded person, and one developer. So I kind of had to learn a lot about this stuff, just naturally fell into overseeing some of the product development and doing beta testing with clients. And so I kind of come more from the business background really, but got really deep into coding over the last, whatever it's been, 5 or 6 years. And that's kind of helped steer me this direction more and more and into this new venture, which has been a lot of fun.
Mm. Yeah, obviously as an entrepreneur, you need to know all aspects of your business, and that certainly helps you when you're going in to help other businesses as well. What would you say is a lesson that you learned earlier on in your business that still, stays with you today and you hold dear, ethically or otherwise? What was one lesson that you learned early on that you'd like to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, just off the top of my head, the biggest thing I would say is, regardless of any business, I think that people are kind of the X factor, that's the part that can be harder to control. So I think you have to be really deliberate about that. And by that, I mean whether you're dealing with a client. So for Tyrannosaurus Tech, for example, we actually are somewhat choosy when it comes to who we engage with on a project, right? Like we want to make sure we're getting in with someone that, to some extent, we want to make sure we buy into their idea and we believe in it. We want to make sure that we're comfortable with the founders and their dynamic and how we interact with them in the early stages of, discussing their idea and getting a proposal together. Similarly, in various businesses I've been involved in, I think hiring and building up the right culture is insanely important. And I guess my just overarching point here is, regardless of the nature of your business, you can do everything right from like a tech perspective, let's say, right? But if you don't hire the right type of people that represent your company well, that can get you into trouble real quick. If you don't treat your clients with the level of respect they deserve, and again, offer that level of support. And that's one reason that we harp so much on truly being consultative and, having their best interest at heart. And in some cases that means, counseling them out of doing a large project with us, right? Like, again, a great example is we'll have some folks that come to us and they have this huge vision of a product, and, it's going to have this feature, and then it's going to integrate with LinkedIn, and it's going to pull from this API. And oftentimes, we will actually advise them to trim that down and really narrow the scope, because they're kind of, again, taking too big of a swing at that, for their first iteration of the product. So, that often means, frankly, a lower dollar contract value for us. But my point there is just, we think obviously that doing right by your clients, being very sincere in kind of your advice and being very responsive and very, supportive is huge and pays off in the long run. And again, similarly, hiring folks that do right by your clients and kind of have good karma, I think is important. So again, I think dealing with people is kind of the X factor. That's what can be harder to predict because, there's just a lot of different types of folks and a lot of big personalities out there. And that's where I think you have to be very deliberate about what type of culture you want to build and what type of service you want to provide. And again, I think in the long run, being careful and deliberate on that front helps you build, a better business more than anything else.
Exactly. Working with the right people and setting those expectations for success is definitely going to make you have a happier business and much more fun time at work. Now, speaking of work, you have an office at WeWork, is that right? How do you enjoy that?
Well, we don't have an office at WeWork, although we love the space there. So I've been over there several times, and particularly for a few different events that they've hosted there. So one called Co-Founders Lab that they've hosted there, which I'm not actually looking for a co-founder. I have a great co-founder, but it's generally just a good networking opportunity. But yeah, here in Atlanta, WeWork, their location in Buckhead is great. There's some super cool companies, operating out of there. We may be looking for new space here at some point, so it's certainly something we would consider. But it's a great hotbed for, different startups in the area and folks that are working remote, and it's been a good addition to the community here. So we're not tenants yet, but maybe one day.
Yeah, it's definitely a great collaborative space. I love that people from all different walks of life are in there, and there's generally a lot you can learn from all these different people and businesses that are using WeWork to get their business done every day. So we have Richard Sims today from Tyrannosaurus Tech, a software development company located in Atlanta. Thanks for all the information that you've given us today, Richard. Tech is definitely a stumbling block for me. And, rather than trying to figure it out, I would definitely much rather hire a company such as yours to deal with all my problems. So thanks for all the information you've given us today on the show.
Thank you, Neil. Appreciate it.
Well, to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, please hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.